And we are back. I hope you enjoyed the film. Before we start our conversation and discussion, I know what all of you must be thinking. Not a single word about what caused this tragedy. Not a word about why these people are refugees, etc. No mention of Israel, etc. And of course, we realize this film really was made for a particular purpose by a certain group that was hoping to do fundraising for the Palestinian refugees. And we recognize that some of the terminology used, such as like the Arab Palestinians and things like that, they may not be the proper terminology. However, despite all these things, we think the film has very important documentation. It's a great documentary of the condition under which Palestinians or some of the Palestinians were living in the aftermath of the Nakba in 1948, and how horrible the conditions were and continue to be, actually. Another observation is if we really compare the conditions then to today, well, yes, there's been some change, of course. The refugees are not living in tents; they're living in more permanent structures 74 years afterwards. But those structures are not really that much better. Yeah, they keep you from getting covered, wet and things like that. But they're still nowhere near the homes that they used to live in before they were exiled out of Palestine. So with that introduction in mind, I would open the discussion. If you like to speak in person, please raise your hands and I will bring you on as a panelist so you can talk. Um, so some of the questions and comments all had to do with what I just said. And we have a comment from Sylvia Marsan Sackley. Don't know if you mentioned the story of Dorothy Thompson. I have not mentioned her story. Featured in the opening and now at the end. She was a keynote speaker at the Biltmore Conference, and by war's end was regarded as one of the most effective spokespersons for Zionism. Thompson switched her views around radically after a trip to Palestine in 1945 and ran into difficulties, including accusations of anti-Semitism, which she strongly rebuffed after being warned that hostility towards Israel was, in the American press world, almost a definition of professional suicide. She eventually concluded that Zionism was a recipe for perpetual war. And this is a quote from Wikipedia. Thank you, Sylvia. I had not seen that, and I think thank you for your researching that and sharing it with us. Very interesting. Melinda Smith, how can the film be viewed by larger audiences? Is there a link so others can see it? The question isn't how it can be seen by, I mean, the larger audiences is we need to be able to promote the film and get a large audience to see it. We can't put it on a billboard on the interstate in the US and have people watch it as they drive by. So it has to be some sort of a effort to promote the film and have people see it. And we're happy to work with anybody who's interested in showing the film to a group that they belong to, or know of a way that we can show it to bigger audiences in their local area, perhaps. Do many Palestinians still live in Amman? Question by Susan Garvey. You bet. Amman, at least half the people who live in Amman are Palestinians. There's a huge refugee camp, at least one in Amman called Al Wahdat, which is they're so big they have their own soccer team. There's the Wahdat soccer team club. It's a whole athletic club with a very strong soccer team. And the Wahdat is really inhabited by very poor Palestinians, and it's a sprawling camp, very very large, and thousands of people live there. I don't have really the actual statistics of how many, but it's a huge population lives in there. And there are several other camps in Jordan that has Palestinians, including one of the worst camps by condition is in the town of Jarash, which is Jarash is famous for its Roman city. There's really a lot of Roman ruins in Jarash, including almost a Roman city that has two amphitheaters, and it has a Cardo, which is a main street, and a lot of other sites in the city. Within sight of that Roman city, a huge refugee camp called the Gaza camp. And the reason it's called Gaza is the camp was established in 1967 for people who fled Gaza in 1967 and came to Jordan. And they were housed in that camp, and that's why it's called the Gaza camp. Other people call it the Jarash camp. So hopefully that answers your question. Question from Krista Brun. Powerful question in the film. Why do we have to stay here? Going home is long overdue. Nearly 75 years of al-Nakba, 15 years of Gaza siege, 55 years of occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. What does the future hold? Palestinian refugees remain under siege. We need only look at the families in East Jerusalem, the refugees in the Jenin camp, the victims of settler violence in Hebron, etc., etc. I guess that's that question can be posed to the lawmakers in the United States. It can be posed to Biden, and it can be posed to a lot of the leaders of the Western world who continue to support Israel, despite all these facts and despite all what we've seen. Catherine Jackson, do you know if any other government provided aid or was in mostly nonprofit and religious groups? I personally don't have the details, but I'm sure some of the researchers can tell us. I think most of the aid came from the UNRWA, and before the UNRWA, the International Red Cross. And I personally, my family has an International Red Cross card that goes back to 1949 that has squares on it, and each square has a date when aid was provided, basically rations, a certain amount of flour, a certain amount of rice and sugar, etc. And there's a signature next to it for the person who received the aid. And there's the card. The card is about 5 inches by 7 inches. It has stuff on both sides of it. It's on display at the museum. That it's our family's actual card. And we also have an UNRWA card, and the UNRWA card is people continue to have UNRWA cards and receive rations from UNRWA, and this is 74 years after the fact. The religious organizations have also been heavily involved in providing aid, and you've heard some of the names in the film. And I remember hearing from people, my relatives and parents, etc., talking about some of the aid that some of these organizations have provided. Anybody that comes to the Palestine Museum US in Connecticut is welcome to take a look at our family's UNRWA and Red Cross cards. The Red Cross, the International Red Cross card being the oldest from 1949. What efforts did Israel make to suppress this film, Ty Ebright? I don't know, but the film is not hard to screen. Nobody's really trying to prevent us from screening the film, and the film can be screened anywhere. We just have to work on making the film available to a lot of people. And I'm going through the Q&As. I will loop back to look at the chats in a moment. Vera Lustig, please ask this for me. did no information about the real cause of this exodus get out, either at the time or at any time before 1967? Did nobody ask questions? I grew up in a Zionist home in the 1950s and 60s. The Six-Day War was portrayed as an assault on plucky little Israel. Did the international community and media not question that interpretation? Unfortunately, the Western media has never been that interested in discussing and clarifying what happened in 1948 and what was the aftermath of that. And till today, it's very difficult to get any mainstream media organization to actually discuss the facts of what happened and what is going on now. It is surprising that so many of these organizations, including, so-called respected organization that like the New York Times, which says they do all the news that fit to print. Apparently, the news, the real news about Palestinian suffering and all that, that news is not fit to print. I wonder what it takes to make it fit to print. So the issue of Western media is an issue that's been around a long time, and it continues to exist. And we hope that we make a dent in that armor that we're trying to break through. Harriet Melanowitz. I wonder who the audiences of the film were at the time it was produced and in the years immediately following, and what impact it had. I think it was intended for Americans who were targeted as potential donors for fundraisers to collect funds to supply relief to the Palestinian refugees. Really, the age of the film from 1950, it's really hard to know what happened, and like I said, the people who worked on that campaign are probably not even living these days. So it's very difficult to find. I think the significance of this film is it gives us glimpses of what was going on in 1948 and 49 and 1950 in the early years after the Nakba, and how bad things were and how difficult the conditions were. This isn't to say that the conditions have improved that much. Yeah, they improved a little, but the conditions in the Palestinian refugee camps are still extremely difficult, and then they're horrifying. Krista Bruin again. I'm wondering why there is not more attention given to the discrepancy and injustice of Israel's blocking of the return of Palestinian refugees while welcoming any Jew anywhere in the world to come to Israel and receive full citizenship under the law of return. Well, of course, that's a good question, but anybody that questions that question is immediately branded as an anti-Semitic, and their life is ruined by Israel and its friends. And you can see that is kind of the situation that happens now. Anybody that questions anything Israel is doing is automatically branded as anti-Semitic, even if they're Semitic themselves. That doesn't really matter. Is there a film that documents Israel efforts to suppress this information from 1950 till today? I am not aware of any. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm sure there are efforts. Whether they're being documented or not is another question. Okay, let me look at some of the chat comments here. We've got quite a few here. From Fahd Abu Aqil in Atlanta, the story of our ethnic cleansing of Palestinians is not told, but the story of our Jewish sisters and brothers in Nazi Germany. We see films about what happened every week. I think we need to make more films. I think we need to document what happened to the Palestinians in more detail. We need more films. We need more filmmakers working on this. And it's up to us to tell the story. Nadim Fatale, Amman, I'm Amman prop. There is also Hussein camp on Jabal Hussein, close to Natasha. There is also Dor camp. Yes, multiple camps in Amman. The Wahdat is not the only one. The Wahdat is the one that comes to mind because it's probably the largest. Nada, there are 10 to 12 Palestinian refugee camps in Jordan. I agree with you. There is the Jarash, the one I mentioned. There is the one in Irbid. There are others everywhere. 2/3 of all Jordanians are Palestinians. That is probably correct. Nadim Fattah, Jarash, not Natasha. Yeah, he meant to say Jarash. Yes, okay. Sonia Saad, Palestinian refugees in Lebanon have been living since the Nakba 1948 with neither citizenship nor civil rights. Most of them are still living in refugee camps. That's true. The condition in the Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon is probably the worst among all other Palestinian refugee camps. Justin McCabe, I was struck how in this film and others you've shown, it appears that no distinction was made toward Muslims or Christian Palestinians, though the West tries to encourage division between them. That is true. The makers of the film were very careful to indicate that that Christians and Muslims were being treated the same, and they were participating in all the programs, and the people who were providing aid, they were providing it to both. I think one of the most striking scenes were the orphanage in Jerusalem that was created by the Husseini lady, and I think it's called Dar al-Tifl, and that's one of the most incredible events that took place. And a lot of these orphans were orphans of the people who were killed in Deir Yassin. After the Deir Yassin massacre, there were a lot of children left orphans. All their family were killed, and there were also orphans from Lid. The people in the Lid were expelled at gunpoint in the middle of the summer and were forced to walk in the hills for days. And there were a lot of children that got displaced. There are some families that left children behind because they could only carry so many children with them. So there were a lot of orphans, and she gathered up all these orphans and put them in her home and raised them basically as if they were her children. That organization exists today in Jerusalem. Dar al-Tifl is still operating. From Nadine Sahyun, can this movie be placed on YouTube, Netflix? I think it's already on YouTube. We don't have to place it there. So you go to YouTube, you should be able to find it. Nadim Fatale. Then between Amman and Jarash, there is Baqa camp. Yes, the Baqa camp. Jose Vancourt. This film glorified Christian white Western organizations in many ways. It makes the viewers believe that white people from powerful Western nations are good and innocent. The only valued aspects of this film are the unedited images, which depicts clearly the meaning of the work Nakba. Certainly, the white nations and their leaders in Poland who were responsible for this Nakba. They are the ones that supported Israel and made it possible for Israel to do what Israel did in 1948 and prior and after that. However, there are a lot of good white people out there who donated money and who were very touched by the tragedy that befell the Palestinians and went out of their way to help in any way they could. And we cannot really lump those people with the leaders of these countries who are guilty of supporting Israel. We have to recognize there are many good people out there, and those people need to be recognized and thanked for their efforts. And then from Gretchen Graves, such gratitude for educating us on the ongoing Palestinian situation. Heartbreaking, yet those beautiful smiles of the children are truly amazing. From Rose Esper, American Friends Service Committee provided aid also. They have a collection of oral histories of the aid workers. Among those aid workers was Don Peretz, an American Jew and later scholar of the region. Nina Colors. I taught in the Hebron UN refugee schools, especially in the Dheisheh camp, for several years, and I was the principal of the UN school in Beit Safafa. I can say with honesty that the students in these schools were ideal. They were attentive, courteous, and bright. Going to school with the best aspect of their life was their best aspect of their life. It did not take much to get their attention, and they were in awe of the world around them, brought close by UNRWA. I thank the UN for giving them a taste of humanity and exposing them to our world. Stephanie Tresoff. I met my first Zionist in 1968. She had been to Israel, as she called it, and blamed the Arabs, in quotes, for the conditions in the camps, decrying how dirty and primitive they were. That's quite interesting. Leila Cable, UN cards are proof of status. I became a refugee after 67 when at college, no recognition of our status. Marjorie Milner, this appears to be a United Nations sponsored film. I wish they would put it on their YouTube channel for anyone to watch. Anyone who sees this would understand the basis of what is happening today, and they would, I hope, support a two-state solution. First of all, I don't think the United Nations was behind this film. I think this film was done by an NGO, and that's mentioned in the film. And their effort was totally independent of the UN's programs. Gwendolyn Zohara Simmons. At the AFSC, American Friends Service Committee, a Quaker organization was a main American organization involved in the relief effort. That's true. And I know the Mennonite Church was involved as well, because I remember some of my family and our relatives, they received donations from the Mennonite Church in the form of clothing and shoes and things like that at the time. That sounds pretty typical of Zionists every day. Melinda Smith, can the museum make copies for purchase, or can you provide a link so people can watch online for a fee? We can do better than that. We can give you a link. You can go to YouTube and you can watch it. I don't think anybody is claiming copyright for it at this point. And if they do, we can talk to them and see how much money they want for people to watch it. But I think it's on YouTube. You can go to YouTube and watch it. Can anybody who's on watching with us here, can you go on YouTube and search for Sands of Sorrow and give us the link for that? I would do it, but I have to talk to you guys. Fahad Abakal. Hello, Faisal. We need to begin to ask every person that watching each week to begin inviting one new person per month. We must grow the number of your attendees. Well, I won't stop at one. I think let's start with like maybe inviting 10 people to watch these films, and probably out of the 10, maybe 2 or 3 would actually watch. Mindy Gershon, interesting that these religious groups gave humanitarian assistance after the expulsion, but then it was taken more than 50, 60, 70 years for those same Christian groups to speak out about Israeli apartheid and settler colonialism, and still most don't. Yeah. Nina Collars, have you written about your experiences? I think Nina did, and we hosted Nina at one of our programs, and there was a book that she wrote that we talked about. If you look at our prior events, you'll see that. Vera Lustig, thanks for a very full reply. Sylvia Marsan Sackley, I think the film is most interesting when it reconstructs the origin, employment, careers of the refugees. One person was referred to as a mayor, which means there was a political organization in place before Israel. Zionists always try to claim there was no state or people called Palestinians. Yes, Israel promotes what's called Palestine deniers. The Palestine deniers are those who claim there was no Palestine, there was no Palestinians. And there are lots of those around. A lot of people claim there's no Palestine. Stephanie, Nina, I would read by your book. From Fahad Abakal, if you have good public relations, then your story is known. If you do not have a good public relations, then your story is dead. Rose Esper, it is so important that Palestinians document their experiences before all the elders are gone. There are Nakba archives to contribute to, one archive at the American University of Beirut and another at Palestine Remember. That is true. Layla Cable, Rose read my comment above. Okay. I think we have somebody who raised their hands. Pedro Cruz said we'd like to talk. I'm gonna promote you to a panelist now. Yeah, you can talk now. Go ahead.
Thank you. The movie is playing in the background.
What?
The movie is playing in the background.
It is?
Yeah, but my question was, sometimes in Zoom, you can save the chat. Is it possible I could save the chat for this?
We can save the chat once the recording starts. However, because the chat is by a lot of people and they were not informed that the chat will be published and shared with other people for privacy concerns, we cannot publish the chat.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, if somebody put their contacts there and you're trying to make contact with that person, we can facilitate you contacting the person, but we cannot share things that people expressed without having told them in advance that anything you say can be shared with other people publicly. And we want people to be free to share what they want to share without having to worry about their views and their writings being published without their permission specifically.
Yeah, I found the chat so moving, a lot of the comments.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else would like to speak? We do have a lot more questions, and let's see if we can. There's somebody, Hillary White says, have you been in contact with the organization Salam Shalom, which was founded to build bridges of understanding between Muslim and Jewish women, and was quickly has quickly grown into an international organization? They might be interested in this film. I'll send you an email from them. Yeah, send me something offline, please. Thank you. What is the attitude of Jordanians and Lebanese people towards the camps on their terrain? Is there hostility? It depends. Not all Jordanians are the same, and not all Lebanese people the same. There are certain groups in both parties that are very supportive of the Palestinian, and there are some some groups that are hostile to Palestinians and don't want them in their country and things like that. It's a very complex question. It's just nothing that we can really address in the time we have here. Can this be uploaded to YouTube? Okay. All right. Has anybody tried to find this on YouTube, by the way? Okay, let's see. Most people talking about Khashoggi also. Home Montreal. Okay. Okay, I think somebody. I'm Dorothy Thompson. Okay, it looks like somebody had just done that. And let's see, I'm going to try to find myself here. Okay, let's see. All right, there is a link here, and I'm going to copy it again. Thank you, Carol Carter, for doing that. I'm going to copy. I can't copy. All right, the link. If you scroll up in the chat under Carol Carter, she has a link to this film on YouTube. I'm Dorothy Thompson. So there you go. But let me see if Paul Masters always have difficulty with the suggestion of the solution of a two-state solution. Surely people will now realize that Israel is implacably opposed to this, since it would mean official recognition of a Palestinian state. I don't know if any of you attended the event we had with Gidon Levy, the famous Israeli journalist who writes for Haaretz. He specifically said that Israel and all of its leaders and all of its governments over time has never intended to have a Palestinian state. Never in any of their strategies or any of their schemes or any of their thinking ever acted in a way that is consistent with allowing a Palestinian state to exist, whether it's a two-state solution or any state solution. That has never been part of their strategy and part of their thinking. So the idea of a two-state solution is a dead idea. It's a dead on arrival idea. And Israel has done everything it can to make sure that there could never be a Palestinian state, including planting, 700,000 settlers in the West Bank and creating what they call the Swiss cheese effect, which is taking the West Bank and filling it up with holes that are made up of Israeli settlements and Israeli settlers. So I don't know what Biden was smoking when he was talking about supporting the state solution. And I don't know if you guys noticed that he didn't say the US supports a state solution. He says, I support the state solution, meaning Joe Biden, not the United States. He was very careful how he chose his words. Okay, I think we're going to be wrapping up in a minute here. I see a couple of hands here. If you, I will let you speak. If you can speak briefly, no more than 2 minutes, please. Lynn Siegel, you can start.
Oh, I just thought it's just a side comment. I just thought it was so revolting that when they asked him about Khashoggi, that he would love to answer questions, but he wants to answer something that matters. So like, what if they asked him about Shireen and Khashoggi and that connection? It's like, he's a great evader, and it's just horrific to see that.
It's basically a master, it's a master talk in hypocrisy. The US has principles, and it has things that the country was built on, which is democracy, justice for all, liberty, and those principles are not being applied in the situation where Israel is involved. They get applied to a lot of other situations, but not when it comes to Israel.
And Faisal, I was in Salt Lake City in 1963, I think it was, when Kennedy was assassinated. 4 years later, this thing happened in 1967. And I was only 14 years old. So I knew nothing,
Thank you. We go next to Nina Collars. Nina, you can talk now. Nina, you had your hand up. You can unmute yourself, Nina. Nina, last call. Okay, we go to Richard Verrill. Richard, you can talk. Richard.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Good. There we go. Thank you. I wrote in chat, but you didn't have time to get to it too many minutes. I just wanted to say that I think that it would be advisable for all Christians and all Jews in the world to read what one of the later Jewish prophets said about what people should do, and that is to turn your swords into plowshares, and for all of those people then to tell the Israeli Jews that's what they should be doing.
Okay, great, thank you. Nadia, you can talk. Nadia Stefan.
Give it my, yes, can.
What happened? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Nadia. I don't see your audio here. There we go. Let's try this. Unmute yourself, Nadia. You're unmuted.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I read somewhere that when Biden hit the soil of Israel, he said, I am a Christian, I don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. So he declared he was a Zionist, and then he says he is for the Palestinian two-state solution. I cannot understand this logic.
Yeah, he's definitely talking from the both sides of his mouth, if that's possible.
Yeah, but he declared it.
Yeah.
Which makes anything that he says about the Palestinians almost caduc, like they say in French.
Yeah. Okay. So let me disable talking here. Disable talking. And let me lower all these hands that have been raised. I think, Rose, you haven't spoken. Would you like to speak? If you want to speak, please unmute yourself. Rose Esber. Unmute yourself, please. Okay. Fahad Abakar, you can speak. Unmute yourself, Fahad, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Faisal, I want to thank you.
Like they say,
Number two, I want to salute the. Can you hear me?
Yeah, like they say in Arabic, la shukr ala wajib. Go ahead.
Ahlan. I want to salute the Presbyterian Church 225th General Assembly that made 4 decisions. One, that the Palestinian Christians came down from 25% to 2% in both Israel and Palestine. We must have solidarity with them. The second one about the Jerusalem
Yes.
that belong to all, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and Israel cannot have the exclusive right. The third one, we pleaded with about Gaza to lift the siege. But the fourth one that everybody raised hell about it, that we followed the action of Beit Salem, Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International to say that Israel is practicing an apartheid system against the Palestinians from the river to the sea. So if you have a church next to you or you are in a key position, say to them thank you, because basically we had zero public relation, Faisal, no newspaper, no television want to cover our action. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Fahad. All right. I think we're going to be wrapping up. Unfortunately, I have to attend to something right after this. And tomorrow's program is a conversation with Francesca Albanese. She is the newly appointed UN Special Palestine Rapporteur. And the first thing in that session we're going to learn is what is the rapporteur? What is that position in the United Nations? Obviously, she is going to be reporting periodically to the General Assembly or to whatever committees they have about the condition of Palestinians under occupation since 1967. And she's already running into all kinds of oppositions from supporters of Israel. Recently, she spoke to the Italian parliament. She is Italian, by the way. And she was mistreated by some of the Italian members of the Italian parliament. And they were not very friendly to her. And they didn't like some of the facts that she was talking about. And we want to make sure that that us as Palestinians and our friends who support Palestine are fully aware of her activities and her presence, and provide support to her and encourage her to continue with her effort to tell the truth about what goes on in occupied territories. So this event is tomorrow at 12 noon, same place. You can go to our website if you have not registered for it, or to the last email I sent you. There was an email that was sent yesterday afternoon. You could register through that email or go directly to the website's events. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm sorry I could not get to all the comments and the questions. There were quite a few. Statistics from today, we had over 110 people watch the film, and we continue to have 71 people participating in the discussion so far. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing some of you tomorrow for the discussion with Francesca Albanese. And as we always say, ma salama, take care.